Hey everyone, welcome to Locked On Lakers for Thursday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky. Andy, Frank Vogel said Wednesday at practice that belief in the Lakers and the possibilities this season is a matter of faith. Do you think the players still have any? We'll talk about that next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Want to thank everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. No matter how you get your podcasts, where you get your podcasts, or when you get your podcasts, we got a podcast for you. We appreciate all the support we've been given. And remember, Locked On Lakers on YouTube as well gives you access to the show, generally speaking, a few hours early, particularly on non-game nights. So you can access the stuff a little before everybody who does it on the just strictly audio version. We'll get to some interesting speculation about what the Lakers are going to be doing this offseason, Andy. It is a bad sign that nationally people are already really talking about the offseason and where things are going. Frank Vogel was asked on Wednesday at practice about the possibilities for this team and why he believes that there's still a chance that this could turn out well, that they can make the play-in, and this almost certainly is going to work its way through the play-in and go from there. And he had an interesting response. He basically said,
winning a title as an 8 seed, what's special about that? You got to win it as a 10 seed.
Andy, as a 10 seed.
Exactly.
So
that's the stuff of legend, baby.
We would do it as a 12 if they would let us. We're just not allowed.
You know what? The league may allow it this year. They need the Lakers.
I don't know. I actually don't. I am not sure that this might be the year that is the exception to the standard rule of the league will do anything it possibly can do to get the Lakers into the playoffs. I don't think that they want any part of it. But he talked about faith.
What do you mean the Lakers lost that play game? They won.
LeBron had 73 points. So they won by 20. Nope. They're out. So he talked about faith, and he said faith is the belief in something that you cannot see. And we have not seen yet that, we've been able to sustain the level of success that's required to go win a championship. And he talked about that. He's very honest, frank. He wasn't trying to blow smoke up anybody's rear. But like he said, that doesn't mean it's not possible. Doesn't mean it's not potentially there. It doesn't mean that it can't happen just because you haven't seen it yet. And I thought this was interesting on two levels. First, that he is being very, candid about the fact that like there's nothing that we've shown this year that would give anybody the belief that, we are a championship caliber team right now. But then I wondered to myself, okay, even if Frank still has faith, do the other guys? Do the guys on the team really believe in the thing that they cannot see this year? Because, Andy, I don't think they do.
Here's how I know they don't, Brian. Today, Wenyen Gabriel and DJ Augustine were introduced to the media for the first time. They did their, sort of informal introductory pressers, and they were both asked about their impressions from afar of the Lakers. And Wenyen Gabriel is young, just trying to find his footing in the league at all. So he put out a more, PR positive spin on things and, talking about just, the potential with this team and, seeing that, there could be better days ahead for them, that sort of thing. Obviously just trying to put his best foot forward because you never know. This could be your next job. DJ Augustine, who is played for roughly 1 billion teams, realizes that your next job is never really your next job. Your next to next to next to next, your next job is probably your next job. He's also like 31, 32, maybe even older than that. And, frankly, too old for this bleep. He started to answer that question by saying, he hadn't really been paying much attention while he was in Houston to the Lakers. He was really focused on mentoring the kids on that team, the view from the outside, but then acknowledged that, he had seen some stuff on social media reacting to the Lakers. And I think at that point caught himself because he's like, wait a minute, if I've seen this stuff and people reacting to the Lakers, then I obviously know what the reaction to the Lakers is.
Let's just not pretend.
And then he just sort of realized, okay, this lie makes no sense, and I'm just going to shift.
I'm just going to trail off. Right, I'm just going to. It just sort of trailed off. And
yeah, he realized halfway through what I'm saying makes absolutely
well. It's
no
like
sense.
I think you could credibly claim as an NBA player that, you know what, I've kind of missed what happened in Orlando this year, right?
Sure.
Geez, the ins and outs of I don't know, the Raptors or like other teams that like even that are good. The Raptors are a pretty good team, but they're kind of a low profile team. Like, okay, I played another conference. No basketball player followed what the Lakers did in the offseason and then has been like, I was just catching up today. What's been going on with this team? I was shocked to find out they've really struggled. The Augustine press conference was fun just because it opened up so many opportunities for deeply cynical jokes that are based around, speaking of faith, the lack of faith one might have in this team. For example, when Augustine was asking, like, what were you doing when this happened and all this stuff, and what have you been up to since? I think the Rockets let him go at the beginning of February. It's like, been driving my kids back and forth to school. I've been picking them up, been doing dad stuff, which, as an NBA player, I typically don't get to do. And my first thought was, oh, don't worry, kids. Dad will be back sooner than you think.
This is not going to become Cats in the Cradle, you're saying.
No. I mean, long before summer break, you'll have a chance to see Dad again. So, I mean, it's like
they grow up fast, but they're not going to grow up
not that fast. It's not that movie Old, the M. Night Shyamalan movie. My kids were 6 when I left town. They were 29 when I got back. And those are that's the sort of gallows humor that the Lakers lend themselves to these days. And if I'm making those jokes, certainly the guys on the team can make them too. I probably think the same thing. And so, like, if Vogel has faith, and I think Frank probably still does, but it doesn't matter if the players don't. And I just keep getting the impression that while they're not quitting, they played hard. They came back from 21 against Dallas on Tuesday. I also get the impression that they don't necessarily believe this is going to end happily.
Well, here's what I think ultimately matters the most. And, Augustine acknowledged, like, hey, we are a 9 seed right now that has been losing. You could end up the 10 seed, but you still have a chance right now. And in this league, all you need is a chance. Like,
chip in a chair, Andy.
Yeah, exactly. Like, anybody who plays poker knows that expression. And, you need to go out there, he said, like, and play hard every night and treat every game like an opportunity. And I think in some respects that actually speaks to the mentality that the Lakers need to have, whether they truly believe or not. They need to fight anyway, because it's the only way you can possibly make this thing happen in the first place. Like, unless, say, somebody like LeBron, that, we've talked a lot about his knee maybe hurting a lot more than he wants to let on, beyond whatever lack of belief he has in this team, no matter what he says. It's pretty obvious because he wanted to move at the deadline, didn't get it, yada, yada, yada. We've been through all that. That just
reminds me of LeBron standing there next to other people on the team going, your lack of belief disturbs me, and choking them out with the force. But, go ahead.
But, unless it's somebody like LeBron that you wonder, like, okay, is this counterproductive to have him keep playing on that knee if the odds of anything coming from it are so low? You are better off, preserving the mileage that he has for next season. Scenarios like that aside, these guys need to go out there and fight anyway, because, again, it's the only way an opportunity will present itself if it does. And B, like, those are the fights that matter the most. You know what I mean? Like, those are the things that you need to be doing. It's just like you're in a situation where it's going to be difficult. And if you want the rest of these games to have any type of point whatsoever, beyond, the Lakers, we only play for championships, that sort of like, this is the real world. Do you want these things to have a purpose at all? If it's going to have a purpose, you're going to have to fight for it. It's really that simple.
To your point about that, there was some news reported by ESPN's Dave McMenamin following the game on Tuesday that could be encouraging on those lines for Lakers fans. Plus, we'll get into reports on Wednesday that add to the speculation about what exactly the Lakers are going to do this offseason with the roster and in the front office. And we'll do all that next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is in full swing for both pro and college hoops for all the latest news, totals, player performance props to where the next fired coach is going to land. God, that one makes me uncomfortable right now. BetOnline.net is the number one
All that
spot.
picture is Frank Vogel being shot out of a cannon.
BetOnline.net.
Where's he going to land? I don't know.
Number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, UFC, odds, and information. So go to the website today, use your mobile device, learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the games start.
Get to the Pelinka stuff in the offseason in the front office. Also, something fun about Kobe Bryant that neither one of us had heard coming out of this coming from Draymond Green's podcast, I believe, an interview with Charles Barkley. So we'll talk about that hopefully before the end of the show. But to this question, Andy, of faith and whether or not the team and the players on it believe that there's still something to play for and there's still something to fight for. McMenamin reported via Twitter after the game Tuesday that LeBron has no intention of shutting it down. And there has been some speculation that he would do that if the Lakers keep losing and things look particularly hopeless and they sink down to a 10, whatever it might be. Obviously it matters how much worse the injury gets, but at least the way things are right now, nobody's putting out that energy that LeBron is going to shut it down. So that means something. And he said after Tuesday's game, and you got to put him 12 feet under before he quits, and you can call him dead. 12, that's double what you normally have to dig to bury someone.
Well, that was inspiring, Brian. At the same time, LeBron was carrying this satchel of what looked like his Lobos tequila up on the dais with him. So you wonder how much of that he had nipped into, like when he declared 12 feet, baby, you got to put me under. Like the next morning, he might wake up like, I said, what?
This is what I love about I love about us. So we're watching on Zoom, and in both of us at the same time texted Bill Orm. I'm like, is that a bottle of tequila in like a cozy, that's next to LeBron? We were completely, kind of drawn in by two things. First of all, bringing your own tequila to a press conference is a boss move, but also too, where does one get like a customized leather sack, like this thing that was obviously tailored for his bottle of tequila? It was beautiful, like this wonderful leather, and he wore it. He looked like an outlaw, like with the the tequila slung to his back, and he needed like a 6-shooter and a duster. It would have been awesome.
He looked like
should have left on a horse.
He looked like an outlaw, Brian, except for the fact that he was also eating orange wedges during that, which kind of cuts down on your badassery.
You know what did in many an outlaw, Andy? Scurvy. That's what. So give the man his post-game orange.
Unsolicited plug, by the way. LeBron's tequila is really good.
It is good.
It's really good.
By the way, I would also, if given up the opportunity, make that a solicited plug. So if anybody's listening, just because we would do it unsolicited doesn't mean it has to stay that way. So
by the way, too, really quick, just to up the ante on this, Sincoro, Jeannie Buses,
also
tequila,
good.
Also really good. So if these two tequila barons connected to the Lakers want to fight for our services, have at it.
Andy and I, and we're going to get to some of these things before the end of the show. We have criticisms of the way that the Jeannie does certain things around the organization. We do not have criticisms of her tequila, though. It is a delightful sipping tequila, and it is worth the premium that it costs. A great deal of speculation, Andy, has been put out there about what the Lakers are going to do this offseason, because barring a miracle, even the most faithful probably understand this is not going to go the way people hoped at the beginning of the year. There are questions to answer about the roster, about the coach, and potentially about the front office. Jake Fisher at Bleacher Report touched on all of these things in a story on Wednesday. But really, Andy, this is all stuff that has been talked about for a little while now. Let's start with Frank. The one thing people seem to agree on around the league is that Vogel ain't coming back. Would you? I've been saying this for a few weeks now. He's not. Anything changed there over the last couple of weeks that you've seen?
Well, I mean, I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. You've actually been saying that for a few months, and
that's true. Right.
And you've never once heard me say, "Yeah, but." The only thing, like I've said, that I really think prevented Vogel from getting fired this season was David Fizdale fared no better, which didn't allow for sort of like a natural seg to take over for the rest of the season.
When Frank was out in the COVID protocols, if Fizdale had ripped off 4 straight wins.
Yes. And then B, I think the Lakers would prefer to eat the money for 1 season as opposed to 1.5 seasons. But that's pretty much it.
Cheap.
But no, I do not expect him back next season.
No.
For a multitude of reasons that we have discussed before, and I'm sure we will discuss again when that moment eventually happens.
So the day after the Lakers play their last game of the season. So what happens from the coaching perspective, though, is directly, the natural, well, who do you think could replace him and what kind of, there's a lot of stuff that you could talk about in terms of the mechanics of who would want the job and who would take the job and all that kind of stuff and all that. But there really, a lot of it is related to the answers to the next 2 questions, which are what happens to the roster and what happens in the front office. Jake Fisher's story at least kind of opened the door. There've been a lot of reporting that says that, Rob Pelinka, who's very close with Jeannie Buss, very safe in his job. Fisher's report opened the door a little bit there, add a little bit of speculation around the safety of Pelinka, which tells me more than anything, stuff's all over the place. It is. And, people sort of smell blood in the water with the Lakers. And when that happens, people just put everything out there. I tend to think Rob's probably pretty safe, but I don't know. Maybe everyone goes. I mean,
the reporting has actually been pretty all over the place in terms of the degrees of safety. From what I've read and, a little bit of asking around, I've heard a bit of mixed opinion as well. But even the people who've said to me that they think Pelinka may not be as safe now as, say, he was just a year ago, thought that there's some runway. Like that they did not expect that this offseason would lead to Pelinka's exit. Granted, stuff has happened since I had those conversations, and you never know how the season's going to end up shaking out. There's also the question of the way things are set up right now with everything being as insulated as this organization typically is, and the Ramby and all of that stuff, and the uncertainty with the roster on a few fronts, and the lack of assets that you have to work with taking over. Like, as much as I know there are only 30 of these jobs, and the Lakers, that's a hell of an opportunity. I don't know if people would trip over themselves as much as you would normally expect. I mean,
hold that thought here a second, because I think that actually is one thing that is related to the coaching aspect of this, and whether or not the way the Lakers operate influences the quality of talent that they're able to get is a really significant question. We'll do that. We'll get to the roster, and we'll try to get to this Kobe item. If we don't, we'll save it for later in the week, but we'll do all of it next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by rockauto.com. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models out there, it is impossible to stock all the parts you need in a traditional chain storefront. And why would you spend 30%, 50%, even 100% more on the exact same auto parts at a chain store or new car dealership anyway? You mark, you fool, you sap. You can get it for way less at rockauto.com. For example, Honda Odyssey fuel pump, $350. Yeah, my dog objects.
That's right.
my dog's
Let's get
like,
behind the
"Hell no."
Honda Odyssey fuel pumps. That's
It-
right. Did you train
this-
him to do that?
This is so weird. My dog right now is barking at a Honda Odyssey. I don't know how this ended up
No,
happening.
probably barking at that really,
Wow.
really, really well-priced fuel pump that it has inside of it from rockauto.com.
I can get that for $216 from Rock Auto. Amazing that happened. They've been serving auto part customers online for 20 years. So go to rockauto.com, see all the parts available for your car or truck, right? Locked on in the How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we and my dog sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. Unbelievable.
It really is. We live in a world where like it's kind of a duality where the Lakers are the Lakers and they are an A+ brand in the NBA, and you are always going to have access to star players, and you're always going to have it's a high profile job, and it's all that stuff. The flip side is the track record that the Lakers have recently for how they treat their coaches in terms of, try to, cheat. They basically cheaped out on Ty Lue. I'm not exactly sure what happened to Monty Williams, but he turned that one down. They eventually get to Frank Vogel, who wins a title, and then they string him along and only give him a year for an extension. That's not necessarily super appealing to coaches who are of the caliber that the Lakers would theoretically want to hire. I don't mean this like he's available, but if you think you're the Lakers and you should be able to get the LeBron James of coaches, Eric Spoelstra or somebody of that caliber, whoever the best coach out there in any given offseason is, ain't coming if you start nickel and diming them in that way, or forcing people onto their staff, or doing some of these other things. The GM perhaps might not be as appealing a job if you don't believe that there really is a good infrastructure around you to make decisions. Whether you have to answer to Kurt Rambis, or that you feel financially you're not going to be able to do certain things because they don't want to pay luxury taxes to a certain point, whatever it might be. Not all of these things are fair, and not all of them preclude you from winning. But we're back to talking about, in Jake Fisher's story, the Lakers were referred to as a mom and pop organization. We are back to talking about that. And you can be a good mom and pop organization and win, but the reputation doesn't help them.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny when you and I were talking about this offline before the show, and I said, like, they're a relic, the Lakers, in terms of the way they are set up and the way they do business. And even like down to how much of their history they rightly and understandably play up, because they have exceptional history. They have the best history in the entire NBA, bar none. And, I mean, our buddy Jeff Pearlman, the book that he wrote is being adapted in the HBO series Winning Time.
Which apparently they don't like.
Yes, they apparently do not like that. But, John C. Reilly is Dr. Bus. Like, things like that don't happen. Mm-hmm. And Jeff's next book about the Kobe Shaq years have been optioned. Like, things like that don't happen just because of palace intrigue. There has, and drama and gossip. There has to be a lot of winning involved for people to care that much. But they are a relic in the sense of the rest of the league in different advancements, whether you're talking about the way their front offices are run, whether you're talking about the type of investments they have with owners, and with diversified portfolios and things like that.
The Bus family used to be the rule, not the exception.
Right.
It used to be, everybody used to be an individual owner, and some were richer than others and all that. But now it's hedge funds and this and that and whatever.
In certain respects, right. And it's a more global world right now, or global country, global league. Players through social media and other stuff have way more opportunities to promote themselves and put themselves out there, which doesn't mean that those inherent advantages the Lakers have no longer exist. They do, but they are no longer the hammer drop that they used to be. And they are no longer something that you can automatically assume will bring players there, or at least pique their interest, no questions asked. They are often the equalizer now. If the Lakers happen to be good and a player has different options on the table, and you could possibly win a championship with the Lakers and everything else that comes with it, yeah, all that stuff can matter, but it is no longer something that the Lakers can automatically count on, getting them whoever they want, whenever they want, no questions asked.
Well, I think the thing that gets lost sometimes in talking about the Lakers' mystique is that it was accompanied by tremendous levels of competence, like off the charts levels of competence. They had Pat Riley as a coach. They had Jerry Buss as an owner, a genuine visionary in terms of how he saw the league and how he thought about the way to put a team together and what the team was supposed to do. And, not just winning basketball, but a certain kind of winning basketball that made the Lakers and Showtime. And you have Pat Riley and you have Chick Hearn and you have Phil Jackson and you have, Jerry West and you have, up and down the line. Mitch Kupchak was an excellent general manager for a long time until I think he kind of maybe a little bit got passed by, but then also too, might have been damaged a little bit by the way that the organization was run. He's starting to make some good things happen in Charlotte. Like that is a difficult level of competence to match. And in a context where it's almost impossible to recreate it. Rob Pelinka could be good. It's almost impossible for him to be Jerry West good. And Frank Vogel can be good.
It's impossible for like pretty much anybody GM in the league to be Jerry West.
And it's impossible for the Lakers to leverage the kind of advantages they used to have in the way that the league is structured today. That's one of the places where, the league is designed in some ways to prevent teams like the Lakers from dominating in ways that they used to. Frank Vogel can't be Phil Jackson or Pat Riley, and Jeannie Buss can't be Jerry Buss. And they could still be good, but being that good. And so it's not just mystique, it's also tremendous talent and competence at a level that is almost impossible to replicate, that the Lakers have to figure out. And that's before, Andy, you get to the players. The endless parade of Hall of Famers that they've had go through, and the amount of people on the All 75 team that played legitimate roles on the Lakers. It's just astounding.
Including, Brian, one that they may be looking to move this offseason.
Yes.
And how you go about doing that with Russell Westbrook.
And one of the, it's interesting. I kind of suggested that, like, why would Russ want to come back next year from a basketball standpoint? I have personal family.
In Jake Fisher's report, just to clarify, it said in there that the interest in moving on from Westbrook could actually be mutual as opposed to something the Lakers are purely pushing.
And that did not strike me as at all odd. Because from a basketball standpoint, again, coach changes, GM changes, roster changes, maybe it's different next year. It's hard to picture this getting better. And if it stays bad again, Russ is going to spend another season, fairly in some ways, unfairly in others, as an avatar for everything that's gone terribly wrong with this team, because it's hard to see them being much better next year if they kind of run it back. So from that perspective, I could see professionally why he would want to go somewhere else. How the Lakers do it is dicey. One of the things that I hadn't even considered that was floated by a source in this story was the idea that the Lakers might stretch him and it's basically 3 years. You would take Westbrook's contract and it would be a cap hit of 16 point whatever million dollars over for 3 years. And that would help the Lakers get a little more flexibility to improve the roster next year. It's also a terribly short-sighted and stupid idea.
Unless there are elements of the math with this that I don't see or understand. And while you and I think, understand the cap reasonably well, we're not
Larry Coon.
Right. We're not those guys. But based on who's going to be on the roster, just LeBron and AD alone, like, cuts down a lot of your flexibility and options as it is, which fine.
As I understood it from this, it would just get them closer to where they could use better exceptions and things like that. But the bottom line of this is it becomes a one of these sort of age-old questions of, are you throwing good money after bad? And one of the things that you have to understand and be willing to accept in making the Westbrook deal is that unwinding it is going to be painful. And stretching him or doing something like that is an example of trying to bypass the pain in certain ways to where you're getting kind of cute on how you fix it and whatever, as opposed to just ripping off the Band-Aid and taking the pain and then trying to rebuild it again the year after when you have like Anthony Davis and maybe THT on your payroll and going on from there. Unwinding the Westbrook deal, if it went wrong, was always going to cause pain. And you can't, I don't think it makes sense to compromise the 2 years following next year in an effort to like make next year's pain slightly better.
Or not just trying to make that pain slightly better, but doing something that, if I want to be critical of Rob Pelinka for something that I think he's done since he joined this organization that I've often found kind of infuriating, is that you would do this with the idea of the most cap flexibility possible, as opposed to trading Russell Westbrook for actual players that may have, not particularly good deals themselves, but they are guys that you can actually put on the court who can actually help you win some basketball games, as opposed to being $15.5 to $16 million worth of dead money on your books, still taking up cap space
for 2 more years following next year.
And Rob Pelinka has valued the idea of flexibility that is pretty much always defined as the most cleanable books possible. And, like contracts that never go past so long, contracts that always line up with each other, that sort of thing. And I understand the appeal of it. And I'm not saying that he's silly for caring about it at all. But there can come a point where you value that particular flexibility so much, it actually creates inflexibility. You actually start losing options and opportunities in front of you because you only see it one way. And it's like, look, you take on 2 or 3 deals that go on, say, 2 to 3 years to get Russ off the books. Yeah, a couple of those deals you might not like having there, but you know what? Use some creativity and flip those guys. Other GMs around the league managed to do
all
this.
red paperclip. Look, I mean, I'll say, I agree with you 100% about that. But also too, if you are going to value your flexibility in a clean cap sheet for the year following, this off season, you certainly don't want to create $15 million of dead money in that clean sheet. So I think stretching him is a non-starter.
I'd like to think it's not, because again, unless there's something that you and I don't understand.
No, I think there's a lot we don't understand about. You said, unless you're missing something with the math. I think we're bad at math, but I think we understand the math when it comes to this.
I don't understand why
and
they
so
do that.
Right. So just, I also question whether or not you're going to be able to get 2 or 3 or 4 usable players for Russell. Well, I don't know which team would do that, but that's a different question.
One guy would be more usable than dead cap space, dude.
There's no question. So yeah, we'll see. We'll get to the Kobe stuff. Try maybe the end of the week or early next, whenever we can.
Just Draymond Green revealed on his podcast talking with Barkley, or Barkley.
Charles revealed
Kobe had been signed actually to be part of the TNT crew, and ended up backing out because he didn't want to do all the PR obligations that come with that show. And there's a lot to unpack from that, and that Brian and I just find really interesting because we find Kobe so interesting. But that was something neither one of us knew.
No idea. Yeah.
So be looking for that conversation, because it's really interesting, maybe even for ways you're not thinking about.
And then Thursday night, obviously the Lakers play the Clippers. This is less about trying to gain seeding and more about stopping the bleeding. We'll see how that goes, and we will talk to everybody after the game.